My wife Gemma walked through our front door at 7:43 a.m. with the kind of confidence that could power a small city. Her heels clicked against our hardwood floor like a metronome counting down to something I couldn't quite name yet. "I had the most amazing night," she announced, tossing her purse onto the kitchen counter with theatrical flair. Her makeup was still perfect, too perfect for someone who'd supposedly been out with the girls until 3 in the morning. I looked up from my coffee, studying her face. Gemma was glowing, practically radiating satisfaction. She moved through our kitchen like she owned the world, and maybe she thought she did. "Amazing how?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. After 15 years of marriage, I'd learned to read the weather patterns in her moods. "Just girl talk, you know how it is." She poured herself orange juice, her movements fluid and graceful. "Sarah and I went to that new rooftop bar downtown, the one with the city views." Sarah, her supposed best friend from the advertising agency where Gemma worked as a senior account executive. I'd met Sarah exactly twice in 5 years, and both times she'd looked at me like I was something stuck to her shoe. "Sounds expensive," I said, taking another sip of coffee. The bitter taste matched my growing suspicions perfectly. "Worth every penny." Gemma's smile was radiant, almost blinding. "Sometimes a girl needs to treat herself, you know?" I knew, all right. I was starting to understand more than she realized. My name is Ashton Parker, and I fix classic cars for a living. Not the glamorous kind of fixing where I wear a suit and shake hands with millionaires. The real kind, where I get grease under my fingernails and curse at stubborn engine blocks that haven't run properly since the Carter administration. Gemma made 3 times what I did, which she reminded me of in subtle ways during dinner parties with her agency friends. I was the blue-collar husband, the working-class accessory she'd picked up in college before she knew better. "I'm going to shower," she said, already heading toward our bedroom. "Long night, you know." I watched her go, noting how she moved with unusual energy for someone who should have been exhausted. Her phone buzzed on the counter where she'd left it. The screen lit up with a text from someone listed as D in her contacts. "Thanks for last night. Can't wait for next time." My coffee suddenly tasted like ash. I'd been suspicious for months, but suspicion is different from knowing. Suspicion is a nagging feeling that keeps you awake at 3 in the morning. Knowing is a cold, hard fact that sits in your stomach like a stone. The shower started running upstairs. I picked up her phone, but it was password protected. Of course it was. Gemma had changed her password 6 weeks ago, claiming she needed better security for work files. I set the phone down and walked to my home office, a converted spare bedroom where I kept my business records and tools. Hidden behind a stack of automotive magazines was a manila folder I'd been building for 3 months. Private investigator Marcus Chen. No, that name felt wrong. Let me start over. Private investigator Tom Bradley had been worth every penny of the $5,000 I'd paid him. Tom was an ex-cop who specialized in matrimonial cases, and he had the kind of patience that came from years of watching people lie to themselves and others. The folder contained photographs, credit card statements, hotel receipts, and a detailed timeline that painted a picture clearer than any confession. Gemma had been having an affair with Darren Walsh, her colleague at the agency. Not just any colleague, her direct supervisor, the golden boy with perfect teeth and a corner office. I spread the contents across my desk, studying them like a general planning a campaign. There were photos of them entering the Marriott downtown, receipts from expensive restaurants I'd never been to, and credit card charges that coincided perfectly with her supposed girls' nights out. The evidence was overwhelming, methodical, and absolutely devastating. My phone rang. Tom Bradley's number appeared on the screen. "Morning, Ashton. I've got the final batch of photos from last night. You want me to email them or drop them by the garage?" "Email them," I said quietly. "And Tom, we're done. You've given me everything I need." You sure about that? I could keep watching for another week, make sure we've got everything. I'm sure. Send me your final invoice. I hung up and stared at the evidence spread across my desk. 15 years of marriage, reduced to a paper trail of betrayal and lies. The shower was still running upstairs, and I could hear Gemma humming something I didn't recognize. My computer chimed with Tom's email. The photos from last night showed Gemma and Darren entering the Marriott at 9:15 p.m. and leaving together at 1:30 a.m. In one shot, Darren's hand was on the small of her back as they walked through the lobby. In another, they were kissing in the elevator, visible through the glass walls. The same elevator I'd ridden with her to her company Christmas party 3 years ago, where she'd introduced me to Darren as my husband, the mechanic. The way she'd said it made it sound like an apology. I printed everything, every photo, every receipt, every bank statement. The laser printer worked steadily for 20 minutes, producing a comprehensive record of my wife's infidelity. When it finished, I arranged everything chronologically on our bed, creating a timeline that told the story better than any confession ever could. At the top of the pile, I placed a single sheet of paper with 4 words written in my careful handwriting. Consequences keep records, Gemma. The shower stopped running. I could hear her moving around upstairs, probably admiring herself in the bathroom mirror, still glowing from her amazing night with Darren. I gathered my pre-packed suitcase from the closet and walked quietly to the front door. My truck was loaded with everything I actually cared about: tools, clothes, and a few photographs from before everything went wrong. On the kitchen counter, I left the divorce papers my attorney had prepared along with his business card. The papers cited irreconcilable differences and adultery, with a detailed accounting of our shared assets, and the prenuptial agreement Gemma had insisted on when we married. She'd wanted to protect her money from me. She never considered that it might work the other way around. I drove to my garage on the other side of town, where my friend Mason was already working on a 1967 Mustang that had seen better decades. "How'd it go?" Mason asked without looking up from the engine block. "Like clockwork," I said. "She should be finding her surprise right about now." Mason was my oldest friend, an ex-cop who'd opened his own gym after 20 years on the force. He'd been the one to suggest hiring a private investigator when I first mentioned my suspicions. "You feel better?" he asked. "Ask me in a week," I said, "when the real fun starts." My phone started ringing at exactly 8:47 a.m. Gemma's name appeared on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. I turned off the phone and got to work on a 1965 Chevelle that needed a complete engine rebuild. There was something therapeutic about taking apart something broken and putting it back together properly. By noon, I'd received 37 missed calls and 43 text messages. I didn't need to read them to know what they said. Anger, denial, bargaining, threats, promises, the whole cycle of someone whose world had just collapsed around them. But I wasn't ready to talk to Gemma yet. First, I had other calls to make. The first call went to Jennifer Morrison, the human resources director at Gemma's agency. I'd met Jennifer at several company events over the years, and she'd always struck me as someone who took the rules seriously. "Jennifer, this is Ashton Parker, Gemma Walsh's husband. I have some information that might interest your ethics department." "Oh, hello, Ashton. Is everything all right?" "That depends on how your company feels about supervisors having undisclosed relationships with their direct reports." There was a long pause. "I think you'd better send me whatever you have." The second call went to Rebecca Walsh, Darren's wife. I'd only met her once at a company barbecue 2 summers ago, but I remembered her as a quiet woman who seemed genuinely happy with her marriage. "Rebecca, this is Ashton Parker. We met at your husband's company picnic. I'm afraid I have some difficult news about Darren and my wife." The third call was to my attorney, Michael Torres. Mike had handled my business contracts for years, and he'd prepared the divorce papers with the efficiency of someone who'd seen this story too many times. The papers are served, I told him. How long before this gets interesting? Depends on how she wants to play it. With the evidence you've provided and the prenup, she doesn't have much leverage. Could be over in 60 days if she's smart. Gemma's many things, Mike, but smart about consequences isn't one of them. By 2 o'clock, my phone had received 71 calls and 96 text messages. I finally turned it back on long enough to listen to the most recent voicemail. Ashton, please, we need to talk. This isn't what you think. I can explain everything. Just call me back, please. I love you. Her voice was shaking, desperate in a way I'd never heard before. For just a moment, I felt something that might have been pity. Then I remembered the photos of her kissing Darren in the elevator, and the feeling passed. Mason brought me a sandwich around 3 o'clock and found me installing a new carburetor in the Chevelle. You're being awfully calm about this, he said. I've had 3 months to get used to the idea, I replied. Today's just the first day she knows that I know. What's next? Now we wait for the dominoes to fall. The first domino fell at 4:15 p.m. Jennifer Morrison called me back. Ashton, I've reviewed the materials you sent. We're going to need to conduct a formal investigation. Both employees have been suspended pending the outcome. How long does that usually take? 2 weeks, maybe 3. This kind of situation, it's not good for anyone involved. The second domino fell 20 minutes later. Rebecca Walsh called, her voice tight with controlled fury. I confronted Darren with the photos. He's packing his things now. I wanted to thank you for telling me the truth. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Better than being the last to know, she said. I hope your wife appreciates what she's thrown away. I doubted that Gemma was capable of that kind of self-reflection, but I kept the thought to myself. By 6 o'clock, the calls and texts from Gemma had stopped. Either her phone had died, or she'd finally realized I wasn't going to answer. Instead, I received a call from her sister Lisa, who lived in California. Ashton, what the hell is going on? Gemma called me crying, saying you'd lost your mind and moved out without warning. Did she mention the part about sleeping with her boss for 6 months? Long pause. She said you were making false accusations. I've got about 200 photographs that say otherwise. Your sister's been living a double life, Lisa. I just stopped pretending I didn't know about it. Jesus, are you sure? Sure enough to file for divorce this morning. Another pause. I'm sorry, Ashton. I really am. Gemma always was selfish, but I hoped marriage might have changed her. Some people don't change. They just get better at hiding who they really are. At 7 o'clock, I was closing up the garage when a familiar BMW pulled into the parking lot. Gemma sat behind the wheel, her face streaked with tears and mascara. She'd been crying hard enough to ruin her perfect makeup. I walked over to her car but didn't get in. She rolled down the window, looking up at me with red, swollen eyes. Ashton, please. We need to talk. I think the photos say everything that needs saying. It's not what you think. It just happened, and I didn't know how to stop it. It happened for 6 months, Gemma. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. About 200 choices, actually. She flinched like I'd slapped her. I never meant for you to find out like this. You never meant for me to find out at all. That's not true. I was going to tell you. I just needed time to figure out how. You had time. 6 months of time. You spent it lying to my face and sleeping with your boss. Her tears started fresh, and for a moment she looked like the young woman I'd married 15 years ago. Before the ambition and the affairs and the slow, steady erosion of everything we'd built together. I love you, Ashton. I know you don't believe that, but I do. No, you don't. You love the idea of me. The safe, reliable husband who fixes things and doesn't ask too many questions. But you love Darren more, or at least you love what he represents. That's not true. Then why didn't you choose me? Every time you had a choice between our marriage and your affair, you chose the affair. Every single time. She didn't have an answer for that, which was answer enough. The divorce papers are straightforward, I continued. Sign them and we can both move on with our lives. Fight them and this gets messier for everyone. I can't just sign away 15 years of marriage. You already did. I'm just making it official. I walked back toward the garage, leaving her sitting in her car. She called my name twice, but I didn't turn around. Some conversations are over before they begin. 3 days later, I was having breakfast at Murphy's Diner when David Chen and his wife Jennifer walked in. David had been my friend since high school, and Jennifer was Gemma's former best friend, at least until Gemma had decided that Jennifer wasn't successful enough to be worth maintaining a friendship with. They saw me immediately but didn't come over. Instead, they took a table across the restaurant and spent their entire meal pointedly ignoring me. When they got up to leave, David finally walked over to my booth. Ashton, we need to talk. About what? About what you're doing to Gemma. This public humiliation thing, it's not right. I set down my coffee cup and looked at him carefully. What exactly do you think I'm doing to her? Come on, man. The whole town's talking about it. You hired a private investigator, plastered evidence all over social media, got her fired from her job. It's cruel. I didn't post anything on social media, and I didn't get her fired. She got herself suspended by violating company policy. Same difference. You're destroying her life. She destroyed her own life, and our marriage. I'm just refusing to pretend otherwise. Jennifer joined us, her face tight with disapproval. Gemma made a mistake, Ashton. That doesn't mean she deserves to have her entire world collapse. A mistake? I laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. 6 months of lying and cheating isn't a mistake. It's a pattern of behavior. Everyone makes bad choices sometimes, David said. But you're supposed to be her husband. You're supposed to support her, not tear her down. I was her husband, past tense, and I supported her for 15 years while she was planning her exit strategy. That's not fair, Jennifer said. Gemma loves you. She's devastated by what's happening. She's devastated by the consequences, not by what she did. There's a difference. You're being vindictive, David said. This isn't the Ashton I know. The Ashton you know was being played for a fool. This is the Ashton who finally woke up. They exchanged glances, the kind of look that passes between people who've already decided you're the villain in their story. We can't be friends with someone who would do this to his own wife, Jennifer said finally. It's not the kind of person we want in our lives. Your choice, I said. But before you go, let me ask you something. Did you know about the affair? Another glance between them, this one guilty and telling. We suspected something might be happening, David admitted. But it wasn't our place to say anything. So you knew my wife was cheating on me and you said nothing. But I'm the bad guy for refusing to pretend it didn't happen. It's complicated, Jennifer said weakly. No, it's not. You chose to protect her feelings instead of our friendship. That's your right, but don't pretend I'm the one who ended things between us. They left without another word, and I finished my breakfast alone. It wouldn't be the last friendship that ended that week. Over the next several days, the social dynamics in our small town shifted in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. Gemma had always been charming and popular, the kind of woman who collected friends like accessories. Many of those friends decided that I was the villain in this story, the cruel husband who'd destroyed his wife's life over a simple affair. But others saw it differently. Rebecca Walsh, Darren's wife, had been talking to people, sharing her own perspective on the situation. The story that emerged wasn't flattering to either Gemma or Darren. On Friday evening, I was having a beer at Murphy's bar when Tom Bradley, the private investigator, walked in and sat down next to me. Buy you a drink? He asked. Sure. What's the occasion? Professional courtesy. You handled this better than most of my clients. How so? Most people in your situation either fall apart or do something stupid that gets them in legal trouble. You kept your head, gathered evidence, and let the system work. The system's working? Better than you know. Word is that Darren's wife is filing for divorce too, and she's got a better lawyer than he does. Plus, the agency's investigation turned up some irregularities in his expense reports. Nothing criminal, but enough to make him unemployable in this industry. And Gemma? Harder to say. She's got talent, but her reputation's shot. Small town, word travels fast. She'll probably have to move somewhere else to start over. I nodded, sipping my beer. It should have felt like victory, but mostly it just felt like the end of something that had been dying for a long time. Any regrets? Tom asked. About the investigation? No. About the marriage? Plenty. That's the difference between you and most people. You're willing to face the truth even when it hurts. We drank in comfortable silence for a while, watching the local news on the bar's television. Then Tom asked the question I'd been dreading. What now? Now I figure out what the rest of my life looks like. 2 weeks later, I was working late at the garage when Mason burst through the door, his face flushed with excitement and anger. "You're not going to believe this," he said, waving his phone. "I just ran into Steve Morrison at the gym. You remember Steve? He works at the agency with Gemma." "What about him?" "He told me something interesting about your wife's best friend, Sarah. Turns out Sarah doesn't exist." I looked up from the engine I was rebuilding. "What do you mean, doesn't exist?" "I mean, Gemma's been using Sarah as cover for months, but there's no Sarah at the agency. Steve looked her up in the company directory after I asked him about her. No Sarah in the entire company." The wrench in my hand suddenly felt very heavy. "So when Gemma said she was out with Sarah, she was with Darren, every single time." I sat down hard on my work stool, pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The girls' nights out, the expensive dinners, the late-night returns home, all of it had been lies, every single story carefully constructed to hide the affair. "There's more," Mason said. "Steve also told me that Gemma and Darren have been working late together for months, supposedly on some big account. But the account they claim to be working on? It doesn't exist either." Jesus. It gets worse. Apparently Darren's been telling people at work that you knew about the affair and didn't care. That you had some kind of arrangement. The anger that hit me was white-hot and immediate. I'd been calm and methodical through the discovery, the investigation, even the divorce proceedings. But this was different. This was character assassination, an attempt to rewrite history and make me complicit in my own humiliation. "Where is he now?" I asked. "Ashton, don't do anything stupid." "Where is he?" Mason sighed. "Steve said he's been hanging out at O'Malley's most nights since Rebecca threw him out, drinking his problems away." O'Malley's was a dive bar on the wrong side of town, the kind of place where people went to disappear for a while. I'd never been there, but I knew where it was. "I'm going to talk to him," I said, reaching for my jacket. "Bad idea. You're angry. He's probably drunk. Nothing good comes from that combination." "I'm not going to hurt him, Mason. I just want to hear him say it to my face." "And then what?" "Then I'll decide what comes next." I drove across town in my pickup truck, my hands gripping the steering wheel tight enough to leave marks. The rage was building with every mile, fed by months of suppressed anger and humiliation. Darren hadn't just stolen my wife. He'd tried to steal my dignity, too. O'Malley's was exactly what I'd expected. Dim lighting, sticky floors, and the kind of clientele that minded their own business. I found Darren at the far end of the bar, hunched over a whiskey and looking like a man whose life had taken several wrong turns in rapid succession. He looked up when I sat down next to him, his eyes widening with recognition and something that might have been fear. "Ashton, what are you doing here?" "Having a conversation with the man who's been telling people I knew about the affair." He took a long drink of whiskey, buying time. "I never said that. Steve Morrison says differently. Steve's got a big mouth. So do you, apparently. Tell me, Darren, When exactly did I give you permission to sleep with my wife? Look, man, I'm sorry about how this all went down. But Gemma and we didn't plan for it to happen, it just did. That's not what I asked. I asked when I gave you permission. You didn't. But Gemma said things weren't good between you two, that you'd grown apart. And you believed her? She seemed unhappy. So you decided to help her with that problem. He finished his whiskey and signaled the bartender for another. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Explain it to me. We worked together. Long hours, stressful projects. Things just developed. For 6 months. Yeah. And during those 6 months, did you ever think about me? About what you were doing to my marriage? He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his fresh drink. Sometimes. And what did you think? I thought maybe you deserved better than her. The honesty of it caught me off guard. I'd expected lies, justifications, anything but that simple admission. Then why didn't you stop? Because I didn't want to. Because she made me feel like I was special, like I was the most important thing in her world. And because I'm selfish and weak and I wanted what I wanted. I had to give him credit for honesty, even if it was coming too late to matter. What about Rebecca, your wife? His face crumpled. Rebecca deserved better too. She deserved a husband who loved her enough not to throw their marriage away for someone else's wife. You could have divorced her first, done this the right way. There is no right way to do what I did. We sat in silence for a while. Two men whose lives had been destroyed by the same woman for different reasons. Finally, Darren spoke again. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not for getting caught, for doing it in the first place. Too late for apologies. I know, but I needed to say it. I stood up, leaving money on the bar for a drink I hadn't ordered. Darren? Yeah? Stay away from my wife. Whatever's left between you two, end it. She's not worth destroying what's left of your life. Already done. She's been calling me since the suspension, but I won't take her calls. Can't go through this again. I walked out of O'Malley's feeling strangely empty. I'd expected the confrontation to provide some kind of closure, but instead, it just felt like the end of a sad story that had gone on too long. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday morning in October. Gemma didn't contest it, which surprised everyone except me. By then, she understood that fighting would only make things worse for her. She'd moved to Portland 3 weeks earlier, taking a job with a small advertising firm that didn't ask too many questions about why she'd left her previous position. It was a step down professionally and financially, but it was the best she could do with her reputation in ruins. I kept the house, the garage, and most of our shared assets. The prenuptial agreement she'd insisted on had worked exactly as written, protecting the higher earner in case of infidelity. She just hadn't expected to be the one caught cheating. On the day the papers were finalized, I drove to the storage unit where I'd kept everything I'd removed from our house. Most of it was junk, old furniture, books, and miscellaneous items that had seemed important at the time but weren't worth keeping. At the bottom of one box, I found our wedding album. Gemma had spent months putting it together, carefully arranging photos and writing captions in her neat handwriting. It was beautiful work, a monument to a marriage that had seemed solid and permanent at the time. I carried the album to my truck and drove to the garage where Mason was waiting with a metal trash barrel and a bottle of lighter fluid. "You sure about this?" he asked. "I'm sure." I opened the album one last time, looking at pictures of two people who'd believed they were starting a life together. We looked so young, so confident that love would be enough to carry us through whatever came next. But love hadn't been enough. It never was, when one person decided to stop trying. I tore out the photos one by one, feeding them to the flames. The paper curled and blackened, releasing smoke that smelled like burning memories. 15 years of marriage reduced to ash and smoke, drifting away on the autumn wind. When the last photo was gone, I closed the empty album and threw it on top of the fire. The leather cover caught quickly, burning with a bright, hot flame that felt like closure. "Feel better?" Mason asked. "Ask me tomorrow." But I already knew the answer. I felt free for the first time in years, unburdened by the weight of a marriage that had been dying long before I'd admitted it to myself. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. For a moment, I thought it might be Gemma, reaching out one last time. But when I opened it, the message was from Rebecca Walsh. Darren's divorce was finalized today, too. Wanted you to know that justice has a way of working itself out. Thank you for telling me the truth when no one else would. I typed back, "Sometimes the truth is all we have left. Sometimes it's enough," she replied. I put the phone away and watched the last of the wedding album burn to ash. The fire was dying down now, leaving only glowing embers and the acrid smell of burned leather. "What now?" Mason asked. "Now I figure out what comes next." "Any ideas?" I looked around the garage, at the classic cars in various stages of restoration, at the tools and equipment I'd spent years collecting, at the business I'd built with my own hands. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest work, and it was mine. "I think I'll stick with fixing things that can actually be fixed," I said. Mason laughed. "Sounds like a plan." We stood there for a while, watching the fire burn down to nothing. When the last ember had died, I scattered the ashes with my boot, erasing the last physical evidence of a marriage that had ended long before either of us had been willing to admit it. The next morning, I opened the garage early and got to work on a 1969 Camaro that had been sitting in the corner for months. The engine was seized, the transmission was shot, and the electrical system was a mess. But the frame was solid, and with enough time and effort, it could be beautiful again. Some things were worth saving. Others were better left as lessons learned and memories burned. As I worked, I thought about Gemma starting over in Portland, probably telling herself that she was the victim in this story. I thought about Darren, drinking away his guilt at dive bars and wondering how his life had gone so wrong so quickly. I thought about the friends who'd chosen sides and the relationships that hadn't survived the truth. But mostly, I thought about the future. About the cars I'd restore, the business I'd build, and the life I'd create without the weight of someone else's lies dragging me down. At noon, the bell above the garage door chimed, and a woman walked in with the keys to a 1967 Mustang. She was about my age, with kind eyes and grease under her fingernails. Someone who understood the value of things that could be fixed with patience and skill. "I hear you're the best classic car mechanic in town," she said. "I'm the most honest one," I replied. "Sometimes that's the same thing." She smiled. "That's exactly what I'm looking for." As I filled out the work order for her car, I realized that Gemma had been wrong about one thing. She'd thought I was just a mechanic, someone who fixed other people's broken things because I couldn't create anything of value myself. But she'd missed the point entirely. I didn't just fix broken things. I made them better than they'd ever been before. I took something damaged and neglected and turned it into something worth having again. It was a skill that applied to more than just cars. That evening, I called my attorney to thank him for his work on the divorce. "How are you holding up?" Mike asked. "Better than I expected. Turns out consequences really do keep records." "What do you mean?" Gemma spent 6 months making choices that led to this moment. Every lie, every betrayal, every time she chose her affair over our marriage, it all got recorded somewhere, not just in photos and receipts, but in the kind of person she became and the kind of life those choices created. And now she's living with those consequences. We all are, but at least I'm living with them honestly. After I hung up, I walked outside to look at the stars. The night was clear and cold, with the kind of sky that made you believe in new beginnings and second chances. Somewhere in Portland, Gemma was probably lying awake wondering how her life had gone so wrong so quickly. She'd never understand that it hadn't happened quickly at all. It had happened one choice at a time over months and years of putting her own desires ahead of everything else. But that was her story to figure out now. Mine was just beginning. I went back inside and picked up my tools. The Camaro wasn't going to restore itself, and I had work to do. Good, honest work that would turn something broken into something beautiful. In the end, that's all any of us can do. Take what's broken and try to make it whole again. The difference is in choosing what's worth saving and what's better left as ash in the wind. Gemma had made her choice. Now I was making mine.